Not long ago, there was a simple test, a test that people believed no machine could ever pass. You would sit at a keyboard, type a question into a blank box, and a person somewhere on the other side would type back. Your only job was to guess. Was that a human, or was it a machine pretending to be one? For decades, the machines failed this test. They were clumsy. They contradicted themselves. They forgot what they had said 2 sentences earlier. And every time one of them failed, we felt a quiet kind of reassurance. We told ourselves, there is still a line. There is still something only people can do. Then, almost without anyone noticing the exact moment, the line moved. And then it moved again, and again, until one ordinary morning, millions of people were typing into that same blank box, and not one of them was wondering whether the thing on the other side was human. They had already stopped asking. They were too busy asking it for something else. This is the story of how that happened. Not the story of the machines themselves, but the story of us. The story of how our expectations changed faster than anything in modern memory, and why, having watched the impossible become ordinary, we are now standing here, arms crossed, asking a strange new question. Is that all? To understand how far we have traveled, you have to remember where we started. And where we started was disappointment. For most of its history, artificial intelligence was a field defined by broken promises. In the middle of the 20th century, the brightest minds in computing gathered and confidently predicted that thinking machines were just around the corner. A summer project, some of them said. A few clever researchers, one warm season, and the problem of intelligence would be largely solved. It was not solved that summer. It was not solved that decade. The predictions were so wildly optimistic and the results so modest that the funding dried up. Twice. These long, cold stretches even earned a name: the AI winters. Periods where the dream collapsed under the weight of its own hype and the smart money walked away. So an entire generation grew up with a deeply set assumption. Artificial intelligence was the technology of tomorrow, and it always would be. Forever just over the horizon. The flying car of software. Something you saw in films, something engineers chased, but never something that arrived. That assumption shaped our expectations more than we realized. When you have been promised the moon for 50 years and handed a chess program, you learn to keep your hopes low. You stop expecting wonders. And that low baseline, that quiet, protective cynicism, is the exact place from which we were about to be launched. The change did not arrive as a single explosion. It arrived as a climb. Slow at first, almost boring. The first cracks in our skepticism came from games. A machine learned to play chess well enough to defeat the finest human champion in the world. People were impressed, but they reassured themselves. Chess, they said, is just calculation, brute force. It is not really thinking. Move the line. Then came games that were supposed to be safe. Games with too many possibilities to calculate. Games that required something people like to call intuition. And the machines learned those too. Not by being programmed with rules, but by playing against themselves millions of times, in the dark, until they discovered strategies no human had ever considered. Strategies that grandmasters described with something close to awe as alien. Beautiful. Wrong by every textbook, and yet they won. Quietly, in laboratories, something fundamental was shifting. The machines were no longer being told exactly what to do. They were being shown enormous amounts of the world and left to find the patterns themselves. They learned to recognize faces, to turn speech into text, to translate between languages, to pick a single tumor out of a medical scan with an accuracy that startled the doctors. Each of these was a small miracle, but they were specialists, each locked inside its own narrow task. And so we kept our comfortable belief intact. These were tools, impressive, narrow tools. Nothing that understood, nothing general. The line, we told ourselves, was still there. And then the general systems arrived, and everything we had braced ourselves to believe came apart in a matter of weeks. Instead of building a separate machine for every separate task, researchers built systems that learned from a staggering portion of everything humanity had ever written. Books, articles, conversations, code. The accumulated text of a civilization, poured into a single model that learned over and over to predict what word should come next. It sounds almost too modest to matter, predicting the next word. But scale changed its nature entirely. It could answer questions. It could explain. It could write an essay, draft a contract, debug a program, compose a poem, and then, when you told it the poem was too sad, make it cheerful, all in the same breath. For the first time, the public could touch it. Not read about it in a research paper. Touch it. Type into the box and watch a coherent, thoughtful, sometimes brilliant reply appear, word by word, in real time. In just days, it reached 1 million people. Then it reached 100 million, faster than any product in the history of consumer technology. Faster than the telephone. Faster than electricity reached homes. Faster than the internet itself. Teachers, doctors, lawyers, students, programmers, grandparents, all crowding into the same blank box, all asking the same astonished question. How is this possible? That was the moment the old line simply dissolved. The question was no longer whether a machine could seem human. The question had already moved on to, what should I have it do for me today? Here is the part our minds were never built to handle: the speed. Human beings understand the world through steady change. The seasons turn, children grow a little each year. A skill takes a decade to master. Our intuition is calibrated for gradual progress, for improvements you can see coming. We are very bad at imagining things that double, and then double again, and then double again. But that is exactly what was happening. The systems were not getting a little better each year. They were getting dramatically better every few months. A version that could barely pass a basic exam was replaced, almost before the public had adjusted, by one that scored among the top of human test takers. Capabilities that experts confidently predicted were a decade away kept arriving in a year, then in months. The forecasters, serious, credentialed people, found themselves consistently, embarrassingly wrong, always in the same direction, always too slow, always underestimating. And something strange happened inside all of us as we watched. Each new leap stunned us for a shorter time than the one before. The first time a machine wrote a convincing paragraph, it felt like magic. By the 10th astonishing capability, we barely looked up. We were adapting to the miraculous at the speed it was delivered to us. Our sense of wonder, it turned out, has a refresh rate, and we were exceeding it. This is the heart of the story, because the most remarkable thing that changed was not the technology. It was us. There is an idea in ecology called the shifting baseline. It describes how each generation accepts the world it inherits as normal, no matter how diminished or transformed it is. A grandparent remembers rivers full of fish. The grandchild has never seen them. And so, an empty river feels ordinary, unremarkable, simply the way things are. The same thing happened to our expectations of intelligence, except in reverse and at terrifying speed. What would have seemed like science fiction in 1 year became a basic, expected feature the next. A machine that could write a college essay went from impossible to incredible to, obviously, of course it can. in less time than it takes to finish a single school year. Think about how quickly the words changed. At first we said, "It cannot really do that." Then we said, "I cannot believe it did that." And then, almost immediately, we said, "Why cannot it do this other, harder thing yet?" The astonishment had a shelf life measured in weeks. And once it expired, it did not leave behind gratitude. It left behind a demand. This is the quiet, profound transformation at the center of everything. We did not just gain new tools, we rebuilt our definition of normal around them. The miracle became the floor. And the moment a miracle becomes the floor, it stops being a miracle at all. It becomes the minimum. You can hear the shift in the way people talk now. Listen carefully, and you will notice something almost comic about it. A person types a few sentences and receives a fully reasoned answer, drawing on more written knowledge than any single human could read in 100 lifetimes. And their response? It got one detail wrong. A person asks a machine to generate an image that would have required a professional artist days of work, and they sigh because the hands do not look quite right. We have become connoisseurs of the impossible, critics of the miraculous. We hold these systems to a standard we would never apply to a person, and we do it without a trace of irony. We expect them to be instant, and free, and correct, and creative, and tireless, and available at 3 in the morning. And here is the uncomfortable truth. This is not arrogance. This is just how human expectation works. It is the same reason we are not amazed every single day that a glowing rectangle in our pocket can summon any song ever recorded. All of these were the stuff of fantasy within living memory. All of them are now so ordinary that we complain when they load slowly. Expectation is a ratchet. It only turns one way. It takes in wonder and it hands back demand. And artificial intelligence has fed that ratchet faster than anything in human history. So what do we make of all this? Where does the story go from here? The honest answer is, we do not know. And that uncertainty is itself something new. For decades, the future of artificial intelligence felt predictable in its failure. Today, for the first time, the serious experts openly disagree about what happens next. Not by a little, by decades, by worlds. In the first version of the future, the curve does not flatten, it steepens. Every new generation of systems arrives faster than anyone predicted. The systems stop being tools that wait to be asked. They become agents, autonomous, persistent, making thousands of small decisions every day without a human in the loop. In this version, the economy reshapes faster than society can follow. The people who adapt fastest gain extraordinary leverage. The people who cannot adapt fall further behind than any previous wave of automation ever pushed anyone. The question this version leaves open, the one that keeps researchers up at night, is whether we are building the acceleration or whether at some point the acceleration builds itself. In the second version of the future, the wall arrives, quietly, then all at once. The expectations, having been met over and over, rise to a point where the technology simply cannot keep up. There are real limits hiding beneath the surface. Limits that were invisible at lower levels of capability, but become impossible to ignore as the stakes rise. The systems begin to fail in ways that are hard to predict. Not the simple errors of the early days, sophisticated errors, confident errors. The kind of mistake that looks correct until it causes a real consequence. This is not an AI winter. The systems still exist. They are still useful. But the gaudy, unlimited promise deflates. And for a while, perhaps a long while, that floor feels like a ceiling. In the third version of the future, artificial intelligence does not triumph and it does not stumble. It does something far stranger. It vanishes. Not from the world, but from the conversation. It becomes invisible in the way that electricity is invisible. You do not think about electricity when you turn on a light. You simply expect it to be there. In this world, artificial intelligence becomes the substrate. It is woven into every surface of working and learning and deciding so thoroughly that there is no longer a category called AI tools. It is simply how things work. And the thing we should probably notice about this version, while we can still notice it, is that invisible infrastructure still fails, still has owners, still makes choices about who it serves. The water stopped feeling political a long time before we discovered what was in it. 3 scenarios, 3 futures, all of them possible from where we stand. But look at what they have in common. In every version, the thing that changes most is not the technology. It is us, our relationship to it, our expectations of it, our ability, or failure, to keep our eyes open about what it is doing and what it is not. This is the oldest truth in the history of powerful tools. They do not reshape the world on their own. They reshape the world through the choices of the people who use them, ignore them, fear them, profit from them, and try to govern them. The tool is never the whole story. The tool is just the pressure. What we do under that pressure is the story. We have already changed more than we know, faster than any previous generation of humans has ever had to change, and the pace will not slow. The blank box is still there. The cursor still blinks. The question we were too busy to ask, what exactly is on the other side, is still worth asking. Maybe especially now. Maybe especially while we still can.